Hello and welcome back to Cursed Lullabies. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered like cursed lullabies, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I hate AI. Not in a quirky way, not in a ha-ha, the robots are taking over way. I mean, I hate how it is soaked into everything until it feels like there's no clean surface left. Every third tweet on Twitter reads like it was pumped out by a prompt. My grandparents keep sending me AI cat videos, and they don't even understand why I'm begging them to stop. Even my diary app tried to sell me an AI thoughts feature. Like the whole point of journaling isn't having thoughts in the first place. It's everywhere, and it's exhausting. It's also been killing whatever passion I still had for my job. 2 years ago, I was a junior marketing content creator, and the work was honestly fun. It was real work. I'd brainstorm hooks, watch trends on TikTok, record a couple short videos, edit them, send them to my supervisor for review, post them, move on. It was fast and messy and human. Sometimes the videos flopped, sometimes they hit, but at least I could point to what I made and say, I did that. Now I'm the supervisor. That title sounded like a win when I got promoted 4 months ago. Better pay, more responsibility, a step up. But what it turned into was this. The higher-ups decided that since we have AI now, we should be pumping out triple the content. Quantity over everything. They don't care if the output is soulless. They just want more. So now we've got 6 junior creators, and each of them creates 6 video ads a day. And by creates, I mean they generate. And by generate, I mean they dump a prompt into a tool that barely works, then send the output to me like it's finished. And then my day begins. Because someone has to watch all 36 of those ads. Someone has to catch the weird eye movements, the unnatural cadence, the inconsistent lighting, the brand colors that drift, the logo that morphs by 1 pixel, the shirt that changes between cuts, the product label that becomes unreadable for a single frame. Someone has to flag the mistakes and suggest edits and reprompts and minor fixes that somehow take longer than just making the thing normally would have. That someone is me. My boss knows I need to lock in to get through the mountain of quality checking, so he lets me work fully remote. That's the one mercy in this whole setup. I don't have to sit under fluorescent lights in an office while I watch AI-generated faces sell toothpaste with dead eyes. Tonight, though, even working from home didn't help. I had flagged 1 too many errors, 1 too many the hands look wrong, 1 too many the voice pronounces our product name differently in the second sentence, 1 too many please regenerate because the background looks like a hospital even, though you prompted cozy kitchen. And I felt like screaming at my laptop until my throat gave out. That was when my phone dinged. Stephanie's mom. Hi, Bella. Have you seen Stephanie lately? She hasn't visited for months now. Would be good to hear from you, X. Stephanie, my best friend since high school. The kind of friend where even after a gap, you can fall back into the same rhythm. I stared at her mom's message and realized, with a weird jolt of guilt, that I hadn't seen Stephanie in months either. Not properly, not in a way that counted. I'd been so consumed by my promotion and the work that I'd let my friendships go quiet. Stephanie was also, besides me, the biggest AI hater I'd ever met. If anyone would understand how close I was to snapping, it would be her. She could talk for hours about how AI was frying people's brains, ruining art, draining the environment, and turning work into meaningless sludge. Maybe I needed her. Maybe I needed to vent to someone who wouldn't tell me to just embrace the future. I opened my phone and started typing. Stephanie, I'm so fucking burned out. It felt wrong to come crashing into her life with my drama after 4 months of basically disappearing. I didn't even know what she was doing anymore. What if she was dealing with something heavy? What if her life had moved on, and I was about to dump my stress on her like nothing had happened? I opened Instagram, logged back in, another app I'd abandoned since the promotion, and searched her profile. Her most recent post confirmed she was still a community manager at Hypno AI, which was always funny to me in an affectionate way, because Stephanie was a walking contradiction. She hated gifts, but somehow her and her mom still gave me handmade presents all the time, like it was a language they couldn't stop speaking. She used every privacy tool known to man, who even uses LibreWolf, but she trusted me with her password manager account. She worked at the biggest AI company, and yet she hated AI like it had personally wronged her. The last time we talked in person, she'd leaned in like she was sharing gossip and said she'd tell me some rotten stuff about her company one day. Like actual dirt. Something that made her voice drop and her eyes flick around before she smiled and said, "Not here, later." I scrolled her posts again, letting nostalgia soften the edge of my irritation. Ding. A message notification popped up. "Hey, Bella. Sounds like you were upset. What's up?" My stomach tightened. She'd seen my text before I deleted it. I typed back fast, trying to make it casual. "S.O. sorry, this is my first text in months, lol. You know how busy I've been. OMG, what's going on?" Or don't skip details. I live for the full story. She had every reason to be cold to me. She wasn't. She was still Stephanie, so I sent her a voice note and just let it pour out. The promotion, the output demands, the 36 AI ads a day. The way my boss acted like the tool was perfect and any problem was just my team not prompting correctly. The way I used to feel creative and now I felt like an error-checking machine. When I finished, I realized my voice sounded strained even to me, like I'd been holding my breath for months. She replied right away, "Bestie, yeah, no, this isn't just burnout. This is structural nonsense." I stared at that line and felt seen in a way that made my eyes sting. Damn right, it was structural nonsense. The executives wanted click-through rates like we were producing handcrafted viral art, but they wanted output like we were printing flyers. They refused to understand that the AI tools they kept bragging about simply weren't good enough. And the more you leaned on them, the worse the work got. They thought everything was solvable with better prompts, like reality was just a language model waiting to be sweet-talked. I kept venting. She kept replying. It went on for an hour, then 2. Eventually, I stopped and realized I'd hogged the conversation long enough. "It's only fair I let you vent too," I typed. "Hope this Hypno AI employee didn't mind listening to me shit on AI like that, LOL. How have things been for you? Almo, Bella? I don't mind at all. This isn't just a venting session. This is basically user research at this point." "Haha, right, I guess this is feedback for your company's video generator tool?" "Girl, this kind of feedback is all I get from the community nowadays." "Oh, right, you handle all community feedback, don't you? How's it going?" "Yeah, on one hand, it's actually exciting seeing what AI can do when it's used properly, like helping people brainstorm, speeding up boring parts of work, making creative stuff more accessible. That part, genuinely cool. But a lot of companies choose to use AI the way yours does. More repetitive, more volume, less meaning. Stephanie, the same girl who used to rant about AI like it was a parasite, was typing sentences like, "genuinely cool." I felt my expression pull into disbelief. "Okay, AI Schiller, didn't think I'd see you start tolerating AI LMAO, I wrote. She didn't reply for a bit. When she did, it was careful. "Yeah, you caught me. I still hate how people use AI to replace thinking. Still think it makes work worse, more shallow. And yeah, Your situation is basically that in action, she wrote. But I've seen moments where it actually unblocks people instead of replacing them. Like when someone already has taste, judgment, ideas, and AI helps them move faster, not think less. I told myself it was just her job talking, that hypno-AI had probably worn her down. People adjust to survive. Maybe she'd built a compromise in her head. Hate the misuse, tolerate the existence. Still, something about her tone felt different. Not just older, not just matured. It was like the edges of her personality had been sanded down. While we kept chatting, I scrolled through her Instagram for context, visuals, clues, proof she was still herself. It looked like she'd been transferred recently, because her photos were all from the capital city now, a whole other province away. I didn't even know why a community manager needed to be relocated like that. But her pictures were nice. Cafes, street markets, river walks, smiling selfies with perfect lighting. Perfect. Too perfect. When you spend all day nitpicking AI output, you develop this sense for it that goes beyond the obvious stuff. People always talk about too many fingers or warped text. But honestly, those errors are getting rare now. By 2026, a lot of AI images look almost identical to real photos. Almost. There are still tells, tiny shifts in details that feel like a hallucination. The way skin looks too clean, like it was polished. The way motion blur looks designed instead of accidental. The way backgrounds feel like stage sets. The way objects don't have weight. The way everything looks like it was lit by the same invisible softbox. And Stephanie's photos had that look. It hit me with a wave of disgust and sadness. Not because I thought she was evil for using AI, but because she'd built her whole personality around resisting it. Because she'd been my safe person for that. Because now it looked like she was posting a life that wasn't even hers. I typed before I could overthink it. Don't be mad at me for being too good at this, but do you use AI for your IG pics? I can tell. She took longer to reply this time. When her message came through, it was playful but sharp. Bestie, you really woke up today and chose violence? Huh? First of all, the audacity of that little "I can tell," she wrote. But also, okay, wait. Define use AI, because people say that like it's one thing when it's actually a whole spectrum. Girl, I sit through at least 36 AI videos every day, LOL. I know when pics are made with AI, I replied. And dare I say, I think your pics are fully AI generated? Sorry. Jurler fully A generated. You didn't just offend me. You broke my entire little heart, she wrote. What I will admit, yeah, I probably lean a bit too hard on editing tools sometimes. Lighting fixes, smoothing, cleanup, stuff that edges into that AI-enhanced look. And I get why your brain goes, suspicious, after being marinated in 36 AI outputs a day. No, it wasn't just AI-enhanced. I edit videos for a living. I know what filters do. I know what smoothing does. I know what cleanup tools do. This wasn't that. And I didn't understand why she was lying to me. I scrolled again, looking harder now, looking for something definitive, a reflection that didn't match, a background object that changed, anything that screamed, yes, you're right, this is fake. And the deeper I went, the weirder it got. Her captions felt off too, not obviously machine-written, but bland, like they were designed to sound like her without actually containing her, like a person wearing a Stephanie costume. Then I zoomed out to her grid and noticed something that made my stomach drop. The last photo that looked undeniably real was 15 posts down, about 3 months ago, a picture of her with her mom. Their faces looked natural. The lighting was imperfect. There was the tiniest blur, like Someone had snapped it quickly. It felt like a real moment. Her mom. I remembered the text I'd gotten earlier. "By the way, your mom reached out," I typed. "Sounds worried. Said you haven't been visiting her." Stephanie's reply took time. "Okay, first of all, why is my mom doing side quests and contacting my friends now, or like ma'am?" she wrote. "But yeah, she's not wrong to be worried. I haven't visited in a while. Like before, going home was just a casual thing. Now it's a whole production. Gotta plan it, book a train, carve out actual time instead of just popping by for a weekend. You should at least call her," I typed. "Oh, I do. I don't just call her. I still text her. I send money. We're fine. It's just the physical visiting part that slipped," she wrote. And if I'm being honest, I've been having too much fun here. It's not just about freedom. It's about not having to orbit around family expectations all the time. And it's not even that something bad will happen if I go home. It's just, you know how it is. You slip back into old dynamics without even trying. Old dynamics? That didn't sound like Stephanie. Not because she couldn't feel that way, but because she and her mom had always been solid. Warm. Easy. They weren't the kind of family with unspoken pressure and exhausting expectations. If anything, Stephanie's mom was the adult who'd made me believe parents could actually be kind. So why did Stephanie suddenly sound like she was running from something? "You're like a whole different person now, Steph," I typed. "You're far away, you use AI for your pics, and now apparently you have issues with your mom. Want to tell me what's really happened since we last met?" Low. As soon as I sent it, I remembered the other thing, the rotten stuff she'd hinted at months ago. I typed again, almost at the same time. "Anyway, remember that tea about hypno AI you told me about 4 months ago?" I watched the little typing bubble appear, then disappear, then appear again, then disappear. Finally, she replied with 2 words, "Go on." I frowned at my screen. "With him? Go on. You're the one with the tea, El Mayo." I wrote. "Bestie, that was 4 months ago. You're gonna have to jog my memory a bit." That made me sit up straighter. Stephanie didn't forget things like that. She remembered everything. She remembered names, dates, random jokes from years ago. She remembered the exact day in 10th grade when I'd cried in the bathroom and she ditched class to sit with me on the floor. She remembered my coffee order even when I didn't. And now she couldn't remember what she'd implied about her own job. I'd K what that was about, LOL. "You just told me you knew some rotten stuff," I wrote. "Now if you're ready to spill it, I'm ready to listen, LOL." No reply. Her little green online dot vanished. I stared at her profile. The dot stayed gone. It was late. Maybe she fell asleep. Maybe she got spooked that I was pushing too hard. Still, a petty part of me wanted to poke her. "Don't forget that I have access to your password manager, LMAO. I can find it out myself if I want to." I watched her go online for a second, then immediately offline again. Okay, that was weird, but it was 1 a.m. I'd been texting for hours. I told myself I was overthinking it because I was tired and angry and already in a bad mood. I put my phone on the charger, brushed my teeth, and ran a bath to calm down. The whole time, I kept replaying the conversation. Something in it felt wrong, like I'd been talking to a version of Stephanie that had been trained on Stephanie instead of actually being her. When I finally climbed into bed and checked my phone again, I had 4 new notifications, all from Stephanie, all sent while I'd been in the bathroom. "I really miss you, Bella. Want to meet this weekend? Bestie, why are you acting all non-gossiper nower? I know you're online. Let's have a video call at least. You live in 23 South Dharma Street, flat 4, right? I might drop by sometime." That last message didn't feel like a friendly tease. It felt like someone pressing a fingertip into a bruise just to watch you flinch. What the fuck? How did she know my address? Stephanie had never visited my new apartment. I never posted it. I never texted it. I never even said the street name out loud to anyone besides maybe my parents, and even then I wasn't sure I'd given them the flat number. There was no way she could have casually pulled flat 4 out of thin air. And why was she suddenly acting desperate to see me? Stephanie liked texting, she always had. Video calls made her anxious. She avoided them unless it was an emergency. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I told myself I'd deal with it in the morning. But I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling that address like a dog worrying a bone. I imagined Stephanie showing up at my building, and the image didn't feel comforting. It felt wrong, like the idea of her face at my door wouldn't match the person behind it. So I lay there in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, and I started typing this out just to calm myself down. A way to drain the fear into words, to make it smaller. I kept thinking, maybe her account got hacked. Maybe someone at her company was messing with her. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe she was spiraling. Then, while I was still thinking, my nightlight clicked off. The fan died mid-spin. The sudden silence was so complete that for a second I thought I'd gone deaf. I reached for the ceiling light switch and flipped it. Nothing. I got out of bed and opened the blinds. The city was black. Not just my building, not just my block. Everything. No street lights, no apartment windows, no neon signs. The skyline looked like someone had erased it. A citywide outage, no warning, no news, nothing. My stomach tightened, and I had just enough time to register that this was more than inconvenient. When I heard something break in my living room, glass shattering. The sound came from inside my apartment. I froze in the doorway of my bedroom, every muscle locked. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have my phone in my hand. I didn't even have shoes on. My living room was a dark shape beyond the hallway, and for a moment I couldn't move, because any movement felt like it would announce me. My brain tried to be logical. A glass could fall, a shelf could wobble, a cat could knock something over. Except I don't have a cat. I live alone. I stood there in the dark, listening for a second sound. Footsteps, breathing, anything. Just the quiet. And then my phone, somewhere on my nightstand, buzzed once. Not loud, but enough to make my skin prickle. I didn't want to turn around and look at it. I didn't want to see Stephanie's name lighting up my screen in a blacked-out city. I didn't want to confirm that she was still watching my online status. I didn't want to confirm anything at all. Update. Hey, it's morning now. The power is back on. I'm okay, physically. No one's hurt. Nothing is serious, apparently. The outage is over, and the city is acting like it never happened. I wish the mayor had warned people, because half the night was spent lying awake, wondering what was going on. About the noise in my living room. It was a glass. One of my cups was on the counter, and it fell. I don't know how. Maybe it was too close to the edge. Maybe the vibration from something outside knocked it. Maybe I'm just tired, and I didn't remember where I set it down. It scared me, and I posted too fast last night. I definitely let my imagination run wild. Honestly, writing it out made it feel bigger than it was. I also called Stephanie, and she said something that made the knot in my chest loosen, even though I'm still embarrassed about how much I freaked out. She said I did give her my address during our last meeting, and I must have forgotten. She laughed like it was no big deal. She said she's fine. Better than fine. She's loving the city. She's embracing it, in her words. Really making the most of being there. Hearing her talk like that was nice, I guess. It even got me thinking that maybe I could move there someday, too. I already work from home most of the time. I'm not tied down. My boss would probably be open to it. So yeah, that's it. Everything's normal. The outage was nothing. The glass was nothing. And Stephanie is completely okay. I'm completely okay, too. Story 2. I'm writing this from the front seat of my car, in the parking lot of an old roadside diner. The engine has been running for 2 hours because I'm scared to turn it off. I keep telling myself I'm just being dramatic, that it's just nerves, but my hands won't stop shaking long enough to prove it. The steering wheel is slick under my palms. Every few seconds, I wipe my hands on my jeans like that's going to fix anything. Outside, the fog is so thick I can barely see the neon sign hanging over the diner, and it's only 10 feet away. The light doesn't travel through the air here the way it should. It just dies, swallowed by a gray wall that presses in from every direction. I can't see the road. I can't see the empty spaces between the parked cars. I can't even see the edge of the lot. It feels like the world ends right past my hood. It's been like this for 3 days. 2 weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail from a realtor. Plain envelope, typed address, the kind of thing you almost throw away without opening. Inside was a short note saying my childhood house in my hometown had finally been put up for sale after my mom passed. There were forms, a list of steps, a polite sentence about how they were sorry for my loss. It was all business, clean and tidy, like grief is something you can file away if you use the right paperwork. I hadn't been back in 15 years, not since the accident. Not since the last day I stood in that house and realized I couldn't breathe in those rooms anymore. I'd spent most of my adult life acting like that town was a story I used to know, nothing more. Something far away, somewhere behind me, sealed off by distance and time. The letter broke that seal. At first I'd told myself it would be simple. Drive down, clean out whatever was left, sign the papers, hand over the keys. 1 weekend in and out, and then the house would belong to someone else. The responsibility would be gone. The memories would have a new owner. I packed light, a couple of trash bags, gloves, a few boxes, basic tools, a flashlight. I didn't pack anything sentimental. I didn't want to make space in my car for the past. I figured I'd throw most things away and keep only paperwork and maybe a few photos if I could handle looking at them. The drive was normal for most of the way. Clear roads, dull highway scenery, the kind of trip you can do on autopilot. I even stopped for gas and coffee and felt almost calm, almost proud of myself for being able to do it. I remember thinking that maybe I'd built it up too much in my head, that maybe the town was just a town and the house was just wood and plaster. Then I got within 20 miles. The fog started suddenly, like someone flipped a switch. Not the kind of fog that sits low over fields in the early morning. This was thick and gray, heavy enough that my headlights looked weak. It clung to the windshield and crawled along the edges of the road. The air coming through the vents smelled wrong, like wet ash mixed with something metallic. Old blood is the only comparison that makes sense, even though I didn't want to think of it that way. I rolled the windows up and switched the vents to recirculate, but the smell still got in somehow. It coated the back of my throat. It made me swallow more than normal, like my body was trying to clear it out. Then the radio started acting up. I had it on a station that should have been clear all the way out there, and at first it was fine. Then the music broke apart into static, snapping and hissing. I tapped the screen. I switched stations. I tried AM. Everything had the same noise underneath it, like a second signal was pushing through. And every now and then, in the static, I thought I heard a woman whispering my name. Not loudly, not like a clear transmission, more like a sound your brain puts together out of random noise. A trick. Except it happened again and again. By the time I crossed the town line, my chest had that tight feeling you get when you're trying not to panic. The welcome sign was still there, half hidden by fog. The same cracked paint, the same little symbol the town used on everything. A simple leaf shape that always reminded me of a hand. The streetlights looked dimmer than I remembered, like the bulbs were tired. Their light didn't reach the ground properly. It floated in small, sickly circles. The houses I remembered were still there, but something about them felt off. Paint peeled in long strips that hung like dead skin. Front windows were dark even though it was early evening. There were no porch lights, no TV glow, no movement behind curtains. It was like the whole place had been holding its breath for years and didn't want to start breathing again now that I was back. My old house was at the end of Maple Lane. I could still find it without thinking. My hands turned the steering wheel in the right places like muscle memory was guiding me. But when the house came into view, my stomach dropped. It looked the same in shape but wrong in feeling. The yard was overgrown in a way that didn't look natural. Weeds stood in stiff clusters, like they'd grown and then stopped mid-motion. The front porch sagged slightly. The windows reflected the fog like mirrors, giving nothing back. I parked, sat there for a full minute, and tried to talk myself into getting out. I told myself it was just an old house, just a quiet street, just bad weather. The second I opened the car door and stepped out, the fog wrapped around me like it was personal. It touched my face, my hair, my clothes, damp and cold, and it felt less like air and more like something reaching. My breath came out in short puffs and vanished instantly, swallowed like it was being eaten. I carried my bags up to the porch, found the key the realtor had mailed me, and let myself in. Inside, the smell hit first, rust and damp carpet, and underneath it something stale, like a closed closet that hasn't been opened in years. The air felt heavy. My footsteps sounded too loud on the floorboards. But what really stopped me was how unchanged everything was. The furniture was still arranged the way it had been. The living room looked like someone had left and expected to come back. There was dust, sure, and a thin layer of grime on the surfaces, but the picture frames were still where my mom used to keep them. The old throw blanket was still draped over the arm of the couch. Even the small crack in the wall near the hallway was still there, like a familiar scar. It was exactly where we left it the day my little sister disappeared. I hadn't realized how much I'd been bracing myself for an empty shell, for the clean erasure of time. Instead, I walked into a preserved moment, like the house had refused to move on. I started in the living room because I needed something to do. Busy hands, simple tasks. I put on gloves, grabbed a trash bag, and began picking up old magazines and junk mail. My heart calmed a little as I worked. Dust is normal. Boxes are normal. I tried to make it normal. That's when I found the first note. It was under the couch, folded, written on the back of an old grocery receipt. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's handwriting. She used to press too hard when she wrote, like she needed to force the words into existence. I stood in the middle of the room and read it. Jamie keeps asking where his sister is. I told him she's sleeping. The fog came back last night. I saw her standing at the end of the hallway again. She was smiling, but her mouth was too wide. Don't look at her too long. For a second, I didn't breathe. Jamie is my name. My sister's name was Lily, and even seeing it left unspoken made my throat tighten. I read the note again, slower, trying to find the rational version. My mom was grieving. My mom was exhausted. My mom was losing her mind in a house full of memories and guilt. I let out a small laugh that didn't sound like me. Grief does weird things. People write strange notes when they're not sleeping. People see things in the dark. I folded it, put it in my pocket, and kept cleaning, telling myself I would throw it away later. That night, I didn't sleep well. The air in the house felt damp even with the heat on. I kept hearing soft, settling noises that didn't match the usual creaks of an old building. The fog pressed against the windows so hard it looked solid, like I could push my hand into it and leave a mark. Around midnight, the siren started. It wasn't a police siren, not an ambulance. It was a long, deep air raid horn coming from somewhere in the distance. low enough that it made my teeth vibrate. It rolled through town in a slow wave, and the sound didn't fade the way sound normally does. It seemed to stay, hanging in the air, as if the fog held on to it. The lights flickered. The house went dark for a moment. When the power came back on, I sat up in bed and looked around and felt a rush of cold dread because the walls looked different, darker, as if rust stains had spread while I wasn't looking. Not just around nails or pipes, but in long, uneven trails, like something had seeped through the paint. I got out of bed and touched one of the stains. It was dry, and yet my fingers came away feeling dirty. I couldn't take it anymore. I went upstairs to my old bedroom like being near my childhood things might anchor me. The room was smaller than it used to feel, and the air up there was colder. On my childhood desk, right in the center, was a drawing. I don't remember making it. I don't even remember having paper like that. It showed me and my sister holding hands, smiling. Except her face was scratched out so violently that the paper had torn in places. The scratches dug deep, like the pencil point had broken and kept tearing anyway. Under the drawing, in shaky kid handwriting that looked like mine, were words that made my skin prickle. She's still playing hide and seek. She never left. I stood there with my fingers gripping the edge of the desk so hard the wood creaked. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I wanted to throw the drawing away. I wanted to burn it. I wanted to pretend I'd never seen it. Instead, I put it back where it was, because something in me was afraid to move it. Like touching it would be the same as touching a wound. When morning came, I decided I was leaving. Sale or no sale. Papers or no papers. I didn't care. I'd come back with someone else later, or I'd let the realtor handle it. I told myself I was done being brave. Outside, the fog was even thicker. It swallowed the driveway. It swallowed the street. Standing on the porch, I couldn't see the mailbox at the curb. I got into my car, turned the key, and the engine clicked. Again and again. No turnover. No ignition. Just that dry, useless click that feels like being laughed at by a machine. I sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel, staring into the fog, and I had the sudden, clear thought that the town had heard me decide to leave. I went back inside, shaking with anger and fear, and that's when I saw the next note. It was taped to the fridge, perfectly centered like a reminder. The paper looked clean, the ink dark and fresh, like it had been written minutes ago. You came back. She waited 15 years. The others who left always come back when the fog calls them. Don't go into the basement. She's waiting there now. I stared at it until my eyes burned. My first instinct was to rip it down and tear it to pieces, but I couldn't make myself do it. The note felt like a boundary line, and something inside me warned that crossing it would be noticed. I read the last sentence again. Don't go into the basement. Of course I went into the basement, not because I was brave, because I was cornered, because the fear was already inside me. And once fear is inside you, curiosity is just the way it moves. I needed to know. I needed proof that there was a real explanation. A squatter, a prank, old family letters that my mom had hidden. Something that made sense. The basement door stuck the way it always had. I pulled it open and the smell that came up was like cold earth and old water. The stairs creaked as I went down. Not random creaks, but a steady complaining sound, like the wood remembered my weight. Down there, the air was freezing. My breath looked thick. The single light bulb above the steps flickered, and the corners of the basement seemed to pull away from the light, refusing to be fully seen. On the old workbench, right where my dad used to keep tools, I found my sister's doll. It was the one she'd been holding the day she vanished. I recognized the dress, the stitched flowers, the cheap plastic arms that never sat right in the sockets. But the doll's eyes were gone, just empty holes, and from those holes black liquid had dried in thick trails down its face, like tears made of oil. Next to the doll was a small notebook. My mother's notebook. The pages were wrinkled with moisture, but I could still read the last entries. My hands shook as I turned them, and with each line, I felt my childhood memories shifting, rearranging themselves around the words, making room for things I'd refused to remember. Day 9. The town is changing when Jamie sleeps. The school hallway stretches longer. I saw nurses with no faces today. They were looking for children. Day 12, Jamie heard his sister laughing in the walls. He keeps saying she wants him to play forever. Day 17. The fog is inside the house now. I found black footprints on the ceiling. I think I'm becoming part of this place. My mouth went dry. I closed the notebook, not because I was done reading, but because I suddenly couldn't stand to have the words in the open air. That's when the radio in the corner turned on by itself. We didn't have a radio down there. Not anymore. Not that I remembered. But there it was, sitting on a shelf, dusty, with the dial glowing faintly as if it had been plugged in the whole time. Static poured out first. Then a child's giggle, soft and close. And then my name whispered again and again in a sing-song rhythm, like a game. Jamie, Jamie, Jamie. I ran up the stairs so fast I nearly fell. I threw myself into the hallway and slammed the basement door behind me. I didn't even think about whether a door could stop whatever was happening. I just needed something solid between me and that sound. But when I looked down the hallway, the house was not the same house. It had changed while I was underground. The hallway looked longer than it should have been. The doors were in the wrong places, spaced out in strange gaps. The wallpaper was peeling in long sheets, but underneath it wasn't drywall or wood. It was metal. Dull gray panels like the inside of an old hospital. Cold, industrial, wrong. The air smelled like disinfectant and rust, and the light seemed harsher, less like sunlight and more like fluorescent bulbs, even though I hadn't turned anything on. Then I saw her. At the far end of the hallway, standing where the hallway should have ended, was my sister. She looked exactly like she did at 8 years old. Same height, same hair length, same shape to her shoulders. But her skin was gray and wet, as if she'd been underwater and just climbed out. Her eyes looked too dark, and she was smiling. Her smile was the worst part. It went too wide, stretching up her cheeks in a way that didn't fit a child's face, like someone had pulled the corners of her mouth and never let go. She stood still, hands at her sides, head tilted slightly, patient, like she'd been waiting for me to look. I didn't think, I didn't speak, I just turned and ran. I burst out the front door and stumbled into the fog, and the town outside wasn't right either. It had shifted the same way the house had. Streets I knew bent into dead ends. Side roads that should have led to familiar places stretched into long, straight corridors filled with fog and broken pavement. The sidewalks were cracked in patterns that looked almost intentional, like scratches. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. And along the way, I saw paper on the ground, scattered like trash after a storm. Notes, dozens of them. Some soaked from fog, some still crisp like they'd just been dropped. Different handwriting, different years, different lives, all leaving the same kind of message. I only wanted to visit my parents' graves. Now the graves visit me. The monster wears my guilt. You can't outrun what you did. Seeing what's really here is worse. I stopped long enough to snatch a few of them, read them, and feel my stomach twist tighter with each one. These weren't my mother's words. These weren't even from the same person. They were a record. A pile of warnings left by people who had realized too late that the town doesn't let you visit. It doesn't let you pass through. It doesn't let you come back and then leave like nothing happened. I finally made it to my car. I don't even remember how. One moment, I was on a street I didn't recognize, and the next I was in front of the house again, like the town had folded itself and dropped me back where it wanted me. This time the car started. The engine turned over like it had never failed me. I didn't question it. I jumped in, locked the doors, and drove. I drove for what felt like hours, but the fog never thinned. Every road brought me back toward the center of town. I watched the same broken signs pass by more than once. I recognized a cracked fire hydrant, a leaning telephone pole. The diner sign appeared in my headlights, vanished behind me, and then appeared again later like I'd never left. My phone had no signal, no bars, not even a weak one. It might as well have been a brick. The radio only played static, and underneath it, the soft sound of a little girl laughing like she was just out of sight. Eventually, I pulled into the diner parking lot because I needed a place to stop that wasn't the house. The diner looked half abandoned, windows coated with grime, but the neon sign still buzzed and flickered in the fog, like it was trying to keep time. I parked under it so the weak light would fall on my windshield, and I kept the engine running because silence felt like surrender. Now I'm here, writing this, trying to keep my mind from breaking into smaller pieces. A few minutes ago, I looked in the rearview mirror. I don't know why I did it, maybe because part of me still hopes to see something normal, something that proves I'm just exhausted and scared and imagining things. On the back window, there was a small gray handprint on the inside of the glass. It wasn't smeared like something I could have done by accident. It was clear, fingers spread, pressed with just enough force to leave a full print. The fog on the outside of the car made it stand out even more, like the glass itself was helping me see it. Then I heard something else, soft footsteps, like someone testing the metal. Not heavy enough to dent it, but real enough that the sound traveled down through the frame and into my bones. One foot, then the other. A pause. Then another step, moving from the back toward the front. I'm sitting here with my eyes fixed forward, afraid to look up, afraid to open the door, afraid to do anything except keep the engine running and keep writing. She waited 15 years. She's not playing hide and seek anymore. She wants me to play forever. If anyone finds this, don't come looking for me. Don't come to this town when the fog rolls in. Don't think you'll be the one person who can drive in. Do what you came to do and leave. It already knows you're coming. Story 3. I work as a social worker for the county's Adult Protective Services Division. My job is basically walking into situations most people would rather pretend don't exist. I deal with severe neglect, extreme hoarding, dementia, and confusion that families don't know how to handle, and, more than anything, financial exploitation. If an older person has a steady pension and a house that's paid off, it can bring out the worst in people. Usually it's a relative who suddenly shows up to help, then quietly takes over the mail, the phone, the bank account, and eventually the whole life. It's a miserable, exhausting job. It also trains you fast. You learn how to read a room the way other people read a weather report. You learn what normal looks like and what a performance looks like. And you learn to trust that feeling in your gut when something is off, even when you can't explain why. The file landed on my desk late on a Tuesday afternoon, close enough to the end of the day that I considered pushing it to the next morning. The referral was marked as an anonymous tip from a concerned neighbor. The details were short, but the kind of short that makes your spine tighten because it suggests someone is trying to be careful. An elderly woman, widow, lives alone at the far edge of the county line. Hadn't been seen outside for nearly 6 months. Used to keep a big vegetable garden in the front yard, but the garden had completely turned into weeds. The neighbor also wrote that the woman's monthly pension checks were still being cashed at the local bank. Not by her, though, by a younger man who said he was her grandson, and sometimes by a woman who said she was her daughter. Attached to the referral were county records, property tax records, an old driver's license photo, and a family summary that our office keeps on file for certain vulnerable residents. According to our records, she didn't have any living children. Her only daughter had died decades ago, and she had no grandchildren. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't missing some update. Then I felt that familiar click in my head, the one that says, "This isn't a maybe, this is a now." I printed the documents, grabbed my agency clipboard, and walked out to my car. It was still daylight, but the sun was already low. The drive took nearly an hour. Town faded into scattered rural houses, then into long gaps of nothing. Eventually, even the power lines became less frequent. The pavement got rougher. The last stretch turned into a cracked dirt path that barely looked like a road. The forest in that part of the county is dense in a way that feels old. The trees grow close to the shoulder and their branches reach over the road and overlap. Even in the afternoon, the canopy blocks a lot of the light. It's the kind of place where you can drive for 10 minutes and not see another car, not see a mailbox, not see a person. And if your car breaks down, your phone signal doesn't always matter because it can't always find a tower. The house was at the very end of that dirt road, almost pressed against the tree line. It wasn't tucked into a clearing the way most rural homes are. It looked like the woods had been allowed to creep right up to it. The front porch was old wood, softened by rot. The boards looked darker near the edges where water had soaked in for years. The vegetable garden was dead, choked out by thick vines and briars that had climbed over the old garden beds like they were reclaiming it. I parked in the gravel driveway, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. Everything was quiet, not the normal quiet where you hear birds, distant insects, a little wind. This was heavy stillness. The air felt thick, like the heat before a storm, except there were no clouds. I remember noticing that I couldn't hear a single bird, no rustling in the leaves, nothing. I told myself to stop being dramatic. I'd been to plenty of remote houses. Sometimes the woods just go quiet. Still, I slipped my phone into my hand before I got out of the car, just so it would be ready. Then I walked up to the porch and knocked firmly on the front door, the way I always do. Professional, loud enough to be heard, with my normal introduction right after, Adult Protective Services, County Social Worker. I'm here to conduct a wellness check. I waited. A full minute passed. No voice from inside, no TV sound, no movement behind the windows. I lifted my hand to knock again, and before my knuckles touched the wood, the door swung open. It opened smoothly, like someone had been waiting with their hand on the knob. Two people stood in the doorway, a woman who looked mid-40s, a young man who looked early 20s. Both of them were dressed like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Clean, casual clothes, pressed, tidy. The woman wore a floral blouse and slacks. The young man wore a plain gray sweater and dark jeans. At first glance, it looked normal. A family, the kind you'd expect to see in a rural home. But that first glance didn't last. As I stood there, something in me pulled tight. It was their posture. They stood side by side, perfectly straight, arms hanging limp at their sides. They weren't leaning, shifting, squinting into the sun, doing any of the small human movements people do when they open a door to a stranger. They were motionless, like mannequins positioned to block the entrance. I forced my face into a neutral expression and kept my voice steady. Good afternoon. I'm a county social worker. I'm here to do a wellness check on the homeowner. May I come in? Good afternoon, she said. You are here to conduct a wellness check. She repeated me back word for word. Not like someone confirming what I said, like someone practicing a sentence. Her timing was off. Her tone rose and fell in the wrong places. I tightened my grip on my clipboard without meaning to. Yes, I said. I need to speak with her directly. Are you family members? The young man smiled next. We are her family members. I am the grandson. She is the daughter. We provide excellent care. It sounded memorized, like a statement meant to end a conversation. I appreciate that, I said, but procedure requires I speak with her in private. It will only take a few minutes. I took a step forward, putting my weight toward the threshold. Normally, people take that as a cue and step back automatically. They didn't. They stayed planted in place. Their eyes stayed on me. Their smile stayed exactly the same. She is resting, the woman said. She does not wish to speak in private. I'm afraid it's not optional, I said, and I let more authority into my voice than I usually do. If you refuse me access to the homeowner, I will return with law enforcement. It's much easier if you let me see her now. The woman and the young man turned their heads to look at each other, not quickly, not casually, slowly, together, like something controlled the motion. Then the young man looked back at me. You may speak with her, he said. They stepped backward at the same time, finally opening a path. I crossed the threshold into the living room and felt the air inside change. The house was clean, not just tidy, sterile, no mail on the table, no stack of newspapers, no family photos, no mess of everyday life. It looked staged, like a set made to resemble a home, but not actually lived in. The smell was faintly sharp, like cleaning chemicals used too recently or too often. It didn't smell like cooking. It didn't smell like laundry. It didn't smell like old person house, which usually has some mix of dust, medicine, and something warm. She is in the bedroom, the woman said, pointing down a narrow hallway. Her finger was stiff, like she didn't bend it fully. I started down the hall and kept my shoulder close to the wall. I wanted them in my peripheral vision. I wanted to know if they followed. They didn't. They stayed in the living room, standing where they were, watching me go. I reached the end of the hallway and pushed open the bedroom door. The curtains were pulled tight. The room was dim, lit only by a small bedside lamp that made everything look yellow and sickly. The elderly woman was in the bed. The breath caught in my throat. I've seen malnourishment. I've seen neglect. But the sight of her made my brain stall for a second. She was severely emaciated, like her body had been drained down to the frame. Her skin stretched tight over bone. Bruises bloomed across her arms and face in ugly colors. She looked fragile in a way that made me think if I grabbed her too hard, I'd break something. Her eyes were wide and sunken, and they moved fast, darting around the room like she was watching for something to appear. I stepped into the bedroom and shut the door behind me. My hand found the little push-button lock on the knob, and I clicked it. It was a flimsy interior lock, but the small sound of it sliding into place gave me a thin layer of separation. I walked to the side of the bed and lowered my voice, gentle the way I've learned to do with scared people. Ma'am, I'm a county social worker. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Can you hear me? Her breathing was fast and shallow, like she couldn't fill her lungs. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. Then her trembling hand lifted and pointed toward my clipboard. I leaned closer, unclipped the metal clasp, and handed her the blank agency forms and my pen. I didn't want her trying to speak if it hurt. I didn't want her trying to speak if someone might hear her. Her hand shook so hard the pen tip scratched the paper. She pressed down like her life depended on the ink. She wrote fast, jagged letters, hard enough that the ink bled through the top page. When she finished, she dropped the pen like it burned her, then pushed the clipboard back toward me with a weak shove. Her eyes were huge, begging. I looked down at what she wrote. They aren't my family. They came from the woods. A cold chill ran down my spine so sharply it felt physical, like ice water poured inside my shirt. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping it was dementia, confusion, paranoia, a phrase taken from a nightmare. But the terror on her face wasn't confusion. It was recognition. A sharp knock hit the bedroom door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was hard, close, like someone's knuckles were right there waiting. Is the wellness check complete? The one who called herself the daughter. It sounded too close, like her mouth was pressed against the wood. I moved away from the bed, positioning myself in the center of the room, where I could see the door and the window. I forced calm into my voice, the way you do when you need time. I need a few more minutes, I called. We're completing paperwork. She is tired, the young man's voice said from the hallway. She needs to rest. You must leave the bedroom now. The doorknob began to turn slowly. It hit the lock and stopped. For a moment, everything went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Then the knob twisted the other way, hard. Metal rattled against the frame. They were testing the lock. Open the door, the woman said. The pleasant tone was gone. We provide excellent care. You must leave. I knew with a clear certainty I can't fully explain that if I opened that door, I wasn't walking out of that house alive. And neither was the elderly woman. My eyes snapped to the window on the far wall, a large sash window facing the front yard. I could see part of the driveway through the gap in the curtains, and beyond it the shape of my car. I rushed to the window and grabbed the latches. They were stiff with age and sealed with thick paint. I slammed the heel of my hand against the frame to break the paint line. It cracked with a dry pop. I dug my fingers under the sash and hauled upward. The window groaned as it slid open, wood complaining like it hadn't moved in years. Behind me, the doorknob rattled harder. Open the door. The voices chanted together, perfectly in sync. Open the door. Open the door. The door bowed inward a little more each time. I heard wood fibers protesting. I heard a sharp crack as a piece of the panel fractured. I ran back to the bed. There wasn't time to be gentle. I'm getting you out, I whispered quickly. Don't make a sound. Hold on tight. I slid one arm under her knees and the other around her back. When I lifted her, it shocked me how light she was. It felt like carrying a bundle of dry sticks. She wrapped her arms around my neck with surprising strength, pressing her face into my shoulder like she couldn't bear to look. The door cracked again, louder this time. A long splinter ran down the center like a lightning bolt. I carried her to the window, swung one leg over the sill, and balanced her against my chest. I ducked through the frame and dropped down into the overgrown grass outside. The landing jarred my knees hard, but I stayed upright. I turned and sprinted for my car. Gravel slid under my shoes. My free hand dug into my pocket for my keys, fingers clumsy from adrenaline. The elderly woman clung to me and made the smallest whimper, then bit it back like she remembered my warning. I hit the key fob, the headlights flashed, the locks clicked. I yanked open the rear door and eased her into the back seat as fast as I could without snapping her limbs. Then I slammed the door, threw myself into the driver's seat, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over and roared to life. I looked up through the windshield. The front door of the house was open. The woman and the young man stood on the porch side by side, motionless again, arms limp. Their faces were set in that same empty smile. They didn't chase me. They didn't shout. They just watched me like I was something leaving that still belonged to them. I slammed the car into reverse, gravel flying, whipped the wheel, aligned with the dirt road, shifted into drive, and floored it. The car surged forward. Trees blurred past. The road was narrow, edges dropping into ditches. I checked my rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see them running after me. The house shrank in the distance. They didn't move. My breath came out in rough, shaking bursts. My hands hurt from gripping the steering wheel too tight. In the back seat, the old woman lay curled, trembling like she might break apart from fear alone. "We're okay," I said, but my voice cracked. I wasn't sure I believed myself. "I'm taking you to the county hospital. You're safe now." I checked the rearview mirror again. The road behind us was empty. Then something moved above it. In the mirror, I saw the young man, the grandson, up in the canopy, moving through the trees like he belonged there, like the branches were stairs. I watched him step onto a huge oak limb at least 40 feet up, then bend his knees and jump. The jump was wrong, not athletic wrong, physics wrong. He launched out over the road, sailed through the air, and covered distance faster than my speeding car. For a split second, a shadow crossed my windshield, and then he landed in front of me on the road. He should have broken his legs. He should have shattered, hit the ground, rolled. He landed perfectly on his feet. A second shadow dropped a heartbeat later. The woman landed beside him the exact same way, silent, stable, like gravity was optional. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the narrow road. I slammed the brakes. The ABS kicked in, grinding and shuddering. The car skidded, sliding sideways over dirt and patches of broken asphalt. Dust rose up around the hood. We stopped less than 10 feet from them. They didn't flinch. They didn't step back. Their smiles were gone now, replaced by something flat and cold, like mild annoyance. Then they started walking toward my car. They came right up to the driver's side window. The woman lifted her hand and tapped gently on the glass with her knuckles. "Lower the window politely," she said. Her voice was muffled through the glass, but it still had that hollow sound like it didn't belong to a normal throat. I didn't move. My brain tried to do math. Reverse was risky. The road was too narrow and the ditches were deep. If I tried to ram them, I didn't believe the car would stop them. After what I just saw, I wasn't even sure I could injure them. Slowly, I rolled the window down about 2 inches, just enough to hear, not enough for a hand to fit through easily. "What do you want?" I asked, and I hated how thin my voice sounded. The young man leaned down until his eyes were level with the gap. "You must leave the old woman," he said calmly. "She belongs to us. Open the doors and walk away, or we will kill you." He said it like he was telling me the weather. I tightened my grip on my phone in my lap. "If you touch this car, I'll call the police. I'll have every sheriff's deputy in the county here in 10 minutes. The woman made a sound that tried to be a laugh. "The police do not matter," she said. "You should know by now that a normal human does not stand a chance in front of alpha humans like us." The phrase sounded ridiculous, like something from an internet forum, except coming from her, it wasn't funny at all. It was a label, a category, like we were livestock and they were explaining the food chain. "We can pull you through this glass," the young man added. "We can break your bones. We can kill anyone who comes here, or we can leave you alive, broken, and no one will ever believe you. They will say you lost your mind in the woods." And I knew he was right. If I survived and told a deputy I watched 2 people jump from a 40-foot tree and land without injury, they would look at my badge, then look at me, and decide I was having a breakdown. They might still do a welfare check eventually, but not fast enough. Not with the seriousness it needed. I needed leverage. Not strength. Not a weapon. Leverage. I stared at his unblinking eyes and forced my face to go cold. "You might be able to kill me," I said, "but you can't kill a server." The young man tilted his head slightly. It was the first real reaction I'd seen from him. I pointed to the small black box mounted behind my rearview mirror. "See that?" I said. "That's a high-definition dash camera. It's been recording since I pulled into your driveway. It recorded you on the porch. It recorded you landing on the road. It's recording you right now." Their eyes flicked upward. I kept going before they could interrupt, pushing the lie as far as I needed to push it. "My agency doesn't store locally," I said. "For worker safety, it streams a live encrypted feed directly to county servers. The footage is already off this car. If I don't check in, my supervisor pulls the feed. They'll see exactly what you are. I leaned closer to the gap, keeping my voice low and steady, like I was negotiating with a violent human trafficker, which in a way, I was. And they won't send local police. They'll send federal agents, the kind that don't care about your property rights, the kind that will cut you open in a lab to figure out what makes an alpha human work. The stiffness in their posture eased just slightly, like a hinge loosening. For the first time, I saw uncertainty. I grabbed that hesitation like a lifeline. "I'm offering a deal," I said. "You step away from this car. You let me drive away with her right now. In exchange, I go straight to my office and delete the recording. No police report. No one comes looking. I'll tell my agency she had a medical emergency, and I took her to the hospital. You go back to the woods, and this ends." The woman's face tightened around the eyes, a flash of real anger leaking through. "You will erase the record," she said. "I will erase it from the main server," I promised, forcing the words out like I believed them. The young man stepped back from the window. "We accept the deal," he said. Then his tone sharpened just slightly. "But understand this, we will watch, we will make sure you commit to it. If the record is seen, we will find you." "We have a deal," I said. They turned and walked away from the car, moving to the edge of the road. Then, without a sound, both of them jumped straight up into the trees. Not climbed, not scrambled. Jumped like the air was solid enough to push against. They disappeared into the canopy and were gone. I didn't wait. I rolled the window up, hit the accelerator, and drove like I was trying to outrun my own heartbeat. I didn't slow down until I hit the main highway, and even then my hands were shaking too hard to feel normal on the wheel. At the county hospital, I carried the old woman into the emergency room and handed her over to staff. I told the attending physician that I'd found her in severe neglect, and she needed immediate care and protective custody. They moved fast once they saw her condition. They didn't ask a lot of questions in the moment, which I was grateful for, because I didn't know what I could safely say. From there, I drove straight to my agency office. I went directly to IT and invoked a critical HIPAA privacy issue. I told the administrator that my dash camera had accidentally recorded sensitive footage during a wellness check, including an unclothed medical emergency, and that it had been uploaded to a county server. The words HIPAA violation and lawsuit have a magical effect on county employees. He didn't argue. He panicked, logged into the secure terminal, and handed me the keyboard so I could locate and wipe the file myself. I deleted the primary video feed from the network, exactly like I promised. I saved it to my own encrypted flash drive, then hit delete. I'm writing this now from my locked apartment with the lights on. I keep checking my windows. I keep listening for sounds in the hallway outside my door. I keep thinking about that sentence the old woman wrote, how her hand shook so badly the pen tore the paper. They aren't my family. They came from the woods. I'm leaving this here like a dead man's switch. If they're watching, if they're tracking my digital footprint, to make sure I kept my end of the deal, I want them to read this part carefully. I kept the video. I kept the address. If I ever see you standing in the tree line outside my window, or if you ever try to take another vulnerable person in this county, I will publish proof of your existence everywhere I can. Stay in the woods. Story 4. "Spare any change, missy," the beggar said. He was wedged so tightly between two market stalls that I almost tripped over him. He didn't look like he was sitting there so much as he'd been stuffed into the gap. The crowd flowed around the stalls in a constant stream, and he was positioned at the exact point where distracted people like me cut corners. I said, "Any spare change for an oatmeal?" His accent was thick, his words slurred in a way that made him sound half asleep and half amused. I blinked down at him, and then both of us looked at my purse like it had moved on its own. I hesitated because I always hesitate. It's not that I don't feel bad. It's that I've lived in London long enough to know how quickly a small interaction can turn into a whole thing. But there I was, standing right over him with my purse in my hand, feeling everyone behind me press forward. It was easier to just do it and move on. So I unzipped my purse, fished out a coin, and dropped it into his paper cup. He accepted it like it mattered. He bowed his head low, almost theatrical. Very generous, thank you. I forced a tight smile that probably looked polite from far away and uncomfortable up close. I started to walk off, then stopped because when I'm surprised, I talk before my brain catches up. You weren't here yesterday, I blurted. The man looked up at me as if I'd asked something deep and personal. His forehead was wrinkled like folded cloth, and it wrinkled even more as he responded. Always moving from one place to the next, Missy. That's how I live, a necessity, if you will. I nodded like that made sense, and I tried to step away again. But I couldn't help myself. Another question came out, and I hated myself a little for it even as I asked. You won't spend it on drugs or alcohol or anything bad? I'm not naive. I promise I'm not. I know what a lot of money like that goes toward. I can't even remember the last time I gave money directly to someone on the street. But the suddenness of him being right there, the way he pulled my attention, the way I was standing over him with my purse open, my usual defenses didn't kick in fast enough. His deeply lined forehead tightened. The skin at his temples pulled the white stubble around his ears taut. His lips were cracked, and when he opened his mouth, I saw his gums. No teeth, just soft tissue that looked angry and unwell. Course not, he said. All I want is an oat meal. He pulled his tattered black shoes tighter into his cross-legged position, like he was settling in. Then he jingled the cup in front of him, the coin clicking against whatever else was inside. Good, I said, though I didn't really believe him. That's good. I recovered quickly, like I always do. I turned and threaded myself through the crowd, letting the market swallow me up. I went to the bagel stand around the corner, ordered lunch, and waited while someone in an apron moved fast behind a cloud of steam. With my bag in hand, I headed toward the exit that led back to my office. I stopped at the edge of the market canopy to wait for the light to change. Cars rushed past on the road in front of me, loud and impatient. And then, because I couldn't leave well enough alone, I turned back. Trying to look casual, I touched my earring like I was adjusting it and glanced over my shoulder to see if the beggar was still there. He was. And he was already looking at me. The moment our eyes met, he leaned forward and waved a grubby hand, like we were old friends. I pretended I hadn't noticed and faced forward again. The light changed. I crossed the road and walked back to the office, telling myself the whole interaction would be forgotten by tomorrow. It wasn't. The next day, when I pushed my desk chair back and headed out for lunch, I'd honestly forgotten about him. If I hadn't, I would have used a different entrance or gone somewhere else. It would have been an easy fix, but I walked the same route because routine is comfort, and comfort is lazy. My foot caught on something. I stumbled and my heart jumped, and I looked down. "Hello there, Missy," he said brightly. "Spare any change?" This time I was irritated, not sympathetic. The shock of almost falling flipped a switch in me. "God damn it," I snapped. "Watch where you're sitting." "No, I don't have any." His wide grin faltered. The fake warmth slid right off his face, and what was underneath looked tired and hard. He lowered his cup, but he didn't look away. His bloodshot eyes tracked me as I turned. I could feel his stare on my back while I walked away, weaving between stalls. There were fewer traders open than the day before. It wasn't dramatic. But it was noticeable once you started counting what wasn't there. No florist, no fish stall, no cobbler. Spaces that should have been filled were shuttered or empty, as if the market had lost pieces overnight. Still, the pasta place I'd wanted to try was open, and I'd walked too far to give up now. I ordered, then stood to the side and watched people move through the passageway. Everything looked normal if you didn't focus too hard. A Japanese tourist group followed someone holding a small flag. Men in crisp white shirts and tight trousers talked into their phones like they were closing deals at the speed of light. Teenagers with floppy hair and baggy jeans sat on a terrace, sipping bubble tea and laughing at something on a screen. Then I saw her. A woman pushed through the crowd wearing what looked like a stained duvet wrapped around her shoulders. It dragged along the ground behind her, trailing like a heavy tail, and the way it moved made her look less like someone walking and more like some oversized insect crawling out of a damp place. Her cheeks were pale and dirty. Her hair was matted into a tangled nest. She didn't look at anyone as she passed, just shuffled forward with a slow, stubborn momentum and disappeared around a corner. Pigeons fluttered between the cast iron supports above, nervous and quick. Up the passageway, a tall man in a hood stepped toward people in an aggressive rhythm, his voice loud enough to bounce off the walls. At first I thought he was arguing. Then I realized he was rapping, "You know, it's me, the realest MC. I take what you got, yeah, I do it for free. Better watch your step, bitch. You don't want to test it. Fuck around with me, and it's a lest we forget thing." People avoided eye contact and kept moving. A sound I first mistook for a bird, soft, repetitive, upset, came from near a row of stacked picnic benches. When I looked closer, I saw a woman kneeling on the floor. She wore a veil, and her forehead was pressed to the cold ground. Her whole body shook with sobs. The grief in her was so strong it seemed to ripple through her ribs. Without thinking, I went over and crouched beside her. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Are you all right?" She pressed her head harder into the ground and cried louder, like my voice had made her pain sharper. "What's the matter?" I asked, stupidly, because it's what people ask when they don't know what else to do. I, she stammered. She lifted her head just enough for me to see her face. She looked maybe 40, though it was hard to tell. Her nose was small and round, almost childlike. Her eyes might have been kind, but the tears made them desperate and wild. "Do you need help?" I asked. "An ambulance?" "The police? Help, yes," she said quickly. "Police, no. What help do you need?" "I have nothing," she said, and her voice cracked. "Nothing, nothing, no, no, no." Then she began repeating a word I didn't understand, over and over, like it was the only thing she had left. "Ilmahaiga, Ilmahaiga, Ilmahaiga." She sat back slightly and put a hand against her chest. She paused, swallowed, cleared her throat like she was trying to pull herself together. "I need money," she said. I felt my face go tight. Immediately, my eyes flicked toward where the toothless beggar had been the day before. I couldn't see him from where I was crouched. Maybe that's why I did it. If he had been in my line of sight, I might have hesitated. But he wasn't, and the woman in front of me was crying like her body would break if she stopped. So I pulled out my purse and gave her a coin. She thanked me without lifting her eyes, and then she lowered herself again, forehead to the ground, like that position was home. I collected my pasta when it was ready and left the market from the opposite side, circling around the outside of the building, instead of heading back the way I'd come. My lunch felt heavier than it should have. Guilt followed me all the way to the office. Part of it was because I'd refused the man and given money to the woman, like I'd decided one type of begging deserved help and the other didn't. Another part was because I suspected both of them were professionals, and I'd just paid into the same system twice in 2 days. By the time I got back to my desk, my fettuccine was cold. That night, the whole thing stuck in my head like a song you can't turn off. I'm stubborn to a fault. It's one of the reasons I got where I am. Without that part of me, I'd still be back in a small town pulling pints and telling myself I'd move to London someday. Instead, I'd made it into a job that mattered, in an office where people like to say things like stakeholders and strategy and pretend it was life and death. So on Saturday, I went to work. There was always more to do, sure, but if I'm honest, looking back, I think I went in for a different reason. I think I wanted to prove something to myself. I'd seen red flags the day before, and instead of listening to them, I wanted to push back. I wanted to keep my routine just because it was mine. No, a beggar who'd caught me off guard wasn't going to chase me out of my habits. No, a woman wrapped in a duvet and a hooded wrapper wasn't going to ruin my favorite lunch spots. No, a crying woman wasn't going to make me avoid a place I liked. I don't bow to pressure. That's just how I am. So at lunchtime on Saturday, I walked toward the market like I was marching into a challenge. Outside, London was loud and clogged. Traffic wasn't moving. 2 rows of police held a gap open between a mass of drunk sports fans and a group of protesters waving signs. Scooters and bikes cut through the chaos like they had a death wish. Music blasted from open pub windows. Exhaust fumes mixed with clouds of cherry, blueberry, and bubblegum vapes until the air tasted like chemicals and sugar. It was disgusting. I didn't turn back. When I pushed through the market entrance, it was packed. So many people pressed together that the toothless man didn't spot me at first, which gave me a brief, petty sense of relief. The rumble of trains overhead shook the metal beams, and mixed with the roar of voices. People shouted, laughed, called out orders. It was so loud it almost hurt. I cut through the crowd, my shoulders brushing strangers, my bag tight against my side. I could hear the rapper somewhere ahead, his voice echoing between the stalls. He was stomping around at the top of the passageway, performing like the place belonged to him. People gave him side glances and kept moving. The duvet woman was there too. She drifted through the crowd, and I noticed something unsettling. People didn't just avoid her. They moved away as if there was an invisible barrier around her, a space nobody wanted to enter. The crying woman was there again, still kneeling, still folded into herself. I lifted my chin and kept walking. Near a gyoza stall, I noticed a child standing still in the middle of the moving crowd. He was small, fair-haired, and completely alone. Streams of people crossed in front of him, left to right and right to left, but he didn't move. He stood like a statue with his face turned toward a sweaty brick wall, as if the wall was the only steady thing in the whole market. Without even deciding to, I walked toward him. At the same time, he turned his head slightly. His face was perfectly oval, his skin very pale and unmarked, and his mouth pulled down into a mild frown that looked permanent. Something about him felt off. Not just that he was alone, but the way he didn't seem to be looking at anything. It took me a second to understand why. His eyes were clouded. A white film covered them, hiding irises that might have once been blue. He was blind. In his hands, he held an upturned baseball cap, empty and waiting. I didn't say anything, I just dropped a coin into it. His mouth lifted into a small smile, almost polite. I don't know if he could tell how much I'd given by the sound or the weight. I don't know if it mattered. The moment was over as quickly as it began, and then a rough hand grabbed my upper arm. I flinched and turned. The toothless man had made it through the crowd. He shoved his skeletal face close to mine, close enough that I could see the wet shine on his gums. Thought you couldn't spare no change, missy. His breath hit me like a wall. It reeked of cider and onions. sharp and sour. Panic flashed through me. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want attention. I didn't want hands on me. So I did the stupid thing. I pushed another coin into his hand just to make him go away. His eyes widened, not with gratitude, with hunger. Before I could pull my arm free, I felt something grip my ankles. I looked down and saw the veiled woman on the floor. She had crawled close enough to grab me, her fingers wrapped around my legs like I was a railing. "Il mahaiga, please," she cried. I jerked my feet, trying to pull away, and fumbled for my purse again because my brain kept choosing the same solution. Pay your way out. I reached in to give her something, anything shiny, and then the light above me disappeared. A shadow fell over my face. I looked up. The duvet woman had stepped in close and lifted that stained blanket high, blocking the overhead light like a curtain. Her eyes were wild and focused, fixed on me with a kind of simple, direct hunger that made my stomach drop. "Baba," she groaned. "Baba, mine." I tried to step back. Hands pushed me. Not one or two. Several. Palms appeared from the crowd, reaching, touching, pulling at my sleeves. People I hadn't noticed a second ago seemed to rise out of nowhere. Beggars, real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. Closed around me. For a moment, it was maybe 10 people. Then it was 30. It happened so fast, it felt like the market had changed shape around me. Like I'd stepped into the wrong part of it, and the whole place had revealed what it was. "Hey," I shouted. Enough. But my actions betrayed me. Even as I yelled, I kept handing out coins, kept digging into my purse, kept trying to buy space and safety with money. I heard the rapper's voice get closer, his deep performance warping off the walls as he circled the edge of the crowd, like a preacher leading a terrible service. I caught a glimpse of him stalking around the throng, watching, enjoying, his hood hiding most of his face. Someone shoved into me. I stumbled. A man whose head was covered in thick, dirty hair crawled between people's legs and jabbed my side with the blunt end of an arm that ended too soon. Something wet splashed my shoes. Before I could look down, he vanished again into the bodies. A woman's hand scraped my throat. Her nails were long and curved, more like talons than fingernails, and the scratch burned instantly. An elbow slammed into the side of my head. The crowd held me upright only because there was nowhere for my body to fall. The smell was overwhelming. Sweat, old alcohol, dirty clothes, human waste. It rose like heat and pushed bile up my throat. Black spots danced in my vision. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs from the inside. I couldn't get enough air. The duvet woman hovered over me again. "Baba, mine." Something in me snapped. "Fuck this," I said. And I did the only thing I could think of that might break the pattern. I threw my purse. I flung it up and away with both hands, and for a split second it spun in the air in a lazy arc like it was weightless. Then its contents burst out: credit cards, store vouchers, receipts, bits of paper, coins, raining down over the beggars and onto the gyoza stall beside us. The screaming changed instantly. It climbed into something higher, sharper, greedy. The crowd surged away from me as the beggars stampeded toward the scattered loot. Spittle sprayed across my face as bodies turned and shoved. People who'd been behind me rushed forward, not even focused on me anymore, just on what was now available on the ground. I lost my footing. I went down hard, landing on another body that wriggled away like it didn't want to be pinned. A shoe came down on the meat of my calf, and pain shot up my leg. I grabbed at a filthy sleeve, but my fingers slipped. The fabric was slick with something I didn't want to identify. Panic took over. I curled into a tight ball, trying to protect my head while the mob rolled over me like a wave. I lifted my face to scream for help, and something horrible happened. A bare foot, rancid, damp, jammed into my mouth. Toes shoved down my throat, and I gagged so hard I saw stars. I tried to turn away, tried to spit, but another weight slammed onto my back, crushing the air out of me and forcing my face into the floor. It went dark. Not just dim, pitch dark, like the bottom of a pile where no light reaches. Bodies pressed from every side. Heat, breath, the sound of people snarling and grabbing above me. In that darkness, I honestly thought I was going to die. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm in a terrible way. I had the clear, flat thought that this was it. This was the end. Last morning waking up, last shower, last lunch, last everything. Then light appeared. A faint glow filtered down from high latticed windows. It was weak, but it was enough to show faces above me, blurred by panic and tears. Hands reached down. Two people who didn't look like part of the mob, grabbed me under the arms and hauled me up together. An apron barista from one of the coffee stands, and a barber with a perfect mustache lifted me like they'd done it before, like they'd pulled strangers out of trouble in this place more than once. The moment I was on my feet, my legs buckled. I collapsed back against the brick wall the blind boy had been facing earlier, sliding down it until I was half sitting, half kneeling, trying to understand how I'd gone from being buried to being upright again. The wave of beggars had moved on. They didn't dissolve exactly. They didn't vanish. They melted back into the market, swallowed by the hundreds, maybe thousands of ordinary people moving through the space. The whole thing became a blur of shoppers again. Like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been crushed. I forced my breathing to slow. In and out. In and out. My throat hurt. My calf throbbed. My neck burned where the nails had scratched me. People looked at me. I could feel eyes. Curious, annoyed, maybe sympathetic. I hated it. I hated being a scene. I stood up, brushed myself off with shaking hands, and when an off-duty doctor offered to call an ambulance, I said no. I said I was fine. I said thank you. I lied the way professionals lie, with a calm voice and a stiff smile. Then I walked back to work. As I squeezed out through the main entrance, I saw the toothless man back in his original spot as if nothing had happened. His paper cup sat in front of him again. He looked up, and one of his eyes, his roving one, seemed to twinkle when it landed on me. I didn't meet his gaze. I kept walking, fast, trying to put distance between myself and the market, trying to convince myself it was over. A little further down the street, I pulled out my phone. My hands were still trembling as I opened my banking app, ready to freeze my cards. My purse was gone. My life was in that purse. Of course, I needed to lock things down. The screen loaded. My balance was 0. I stared, waiting for the number to change, waiting for the app to refresh and show the real amount. I refreshed it myself. Still 0. Every one of them. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. I started walking again automatically because stopping made it feel too real, and I told myself it had to be a mistake, a glitch, a connection issue. Anything. Back at the office, I stepped out of the elevator and walked across the air-conditioned, open-plan floor, trying to look normal even though my skin felt too tight. On my desk sat a small paper cup, the same kind of cup the toothless man used. "Whose is this?" I asked, forcing my voice into something casual. Nobody answered. People kept typing, people kept staring at screens. Either they didn't hear me or they didn't want to be involved. I picked the cup up to throw it away, and that's when I noticed writing on the base. Ugly, childish handwriting, pressed so hard into the paper it left grooves. "Dear Missy, you're going to need 1 OVs. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like letters and started looking like a threat. Then I turned the cup over in my hands again, as if there might be more. as if the rest of the message might soften it somehow. But it didn't. It just sat there, in my clean office, on my neat desk, like proof that whatever had happened at the market hadn't stayed at the market, and that whoever had been watching me down there knew exactly where to find me up here. Story 5. When I lost my job, I ran out of choices fast. At first, I did what everyone tells you to do. I updated my resume until the words stopped looking like mine. I applied for everything even remotely related to what I used to do. I told myself it was temporary, that something would come through if I just stayed calm and kept moving. But the days kept passing, and nothing came back except automated emails and silence. Money dried up in a way that felt almost physical, like the air in my apartment was getting thinner. The rent slipped past due. Then it became overdue. Then it became something my landlord brought up every time I walked past him in the hallway. The fridge got emptier. Even my dog, Litma, started looking at me like she could sense the pressure in my chest. There was no safety net waiting for me in the city. No friend with a spare room. No family member with a couch who wouldn't make it feel like a punishment. The only place I could go was my grandparents' old house in the village. No one had lived there for years. It wasn't a home in the warm sense of the word. It was a building that had been closed up and forgotten, sitting under dust and spider webs while seasons passed through it. But it was free. And when you're broke, free becomes a kind of salvation, even when it comes wrapped in rot. So I packed what I could fit in my car, loaded up Litma, and drove out of the city. The road stretched longer than I remembered. The farther I went, the fewer cars I passed. The landscape changed from concrete to fields, then from fields to uneven patches of trees and open land. My phone signal died somewhere along the way. By the time I reached the village, it felt like I'd driven out of the world I knew and into a place that didn't care whether I existed. My grandparents' house sat at the edge of the village, half hidden behind overgrown plants and a fence that leaned like an old man. The gate squealed when I pushed it open. Litma hopped out and started sniffing around, tail up at first, curious. I stood there looking at the house with my keys in my hand, trying to prepare myself for what I'd find inside. I hadn't been there since I was a kid. Back then, it had smelled like tea and old books and whatever my grandmother cooked. Now, even from outside, it smelled like wet wood and abandonment. I unlocked the door. The lock resisted like it had forgotten how to open. When it finally gave, the sound echoed through the empty rooms. The first breath I took inside tasted like dust. The place was exactly what you'd expect when a house sits empty for years, sheets draped over furniture like ghosts trying to hide, cobwebs in corners, a thin layer of grime on every surface. The air was stale, trapped, and oddly cold, even though it wasn't cold outside. Litma followed me through each room, nails clicking on the floor, sniffing everything with serious focus. She seemed happy enough. Dogs don't care about peeling paint. They care about you being near them, about new smells, about open space. For the first time in weeks, watching her explore made me feel like maybe I'd made the right decision. The first few days were quiet. Too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of silence that presses down on you until you start noticing your own breathing. The kind that makes you aware of the house around you. Like it's not just an object, but a presence. A listener. A thing with a memory. I tried not to fall into that feeling. I kept myself busy because that's what you do when you're scared to sit with your thoughts. I cleaned. I unpacked. I fixed little things that were broken or loose. A cabinet door hanging crooked, a window latch that didn't close properly, a faucet that dripped like it was counting time. At night, I slept badly. The bed felt unfamiliar. The rooms were too dark. Every small sound stood out. A branch tapping the window, the house settling, a distant dog barking somewhere in the village. Sometimes I'd wake up and lie there listening, trying to figure out if a noise had happened at all or if my brain was just inventing it because it didn't know what to do with so much quiet. Litma stayed close. always in the same room as me. Sometimes that made me feel better. Sometimes it made me nervous because she would stare at parts of the room like something had moved there. Behind the house, there was an overgrown garden. It used to be my grandmother's pride. I remembered rows of plants, neat and cared for, and my grandfather's little tools lined up like toys. Now it was a mess of tall weeds, hard soil, and wild growth. It looked less like a garden and more like the land had swallowed it. On the fourth day, maybe the fifth, I'm not sure, I decided I would clear it. Part of it was practical. The weeds were crawling toward the house. Part of it was pride. I didn't want to feel like I was squatting in a dead place. I wanted to make the house look lived in again, even if it was just for me and my dog. I told myself maybe I could plant something. Vegetables, herbs, anything. Something real. Something honest. The soil was harder than I expected. It wasn't like city dirt in a planter. This was old ground that hadn't been turned in years. It fought me. I dug for hours, sweat soaking the back of my shirt, hands aching, cursing under my breath. Litma stayed near me for a while, then moved back toward the house and sat in the shade, watching. At some point, I lifted the shovel and felt it strike something that wasn't soil. Clang. A dull, metallic sound that didn't belong in a garden. I froze with the shovel still in my hands, listening. Everything went quiet. Even the birds seemed to pause. I knelt down and scraped the dirt away with my fingers. The soil was packed and dry, and my nails filled with dirt almost immediately. I brushed and dug carefully, expecting maybe an old pipe or a broken tool. What I found made my throat tighten. Coins. Not a few scattered ones, not spare change. A cluster of coins packed together in the dirt like someone had buried them quickly and expected to come back. They were darkened with time, but the weight of them was unmistakable. Even dirty, they had that heavy, dense feel that cheap metal doesn't have. Gold coins, I picked one up and wiped it on my pants. The coin was cold, unnaturally cold, even in the warm sun. The surface was worn, the details hard to read, but it was real enough to make my hands start trembling. Litma stood up behind me and let out a low whine. At first, I didn't pay attention. I was too focused on what I'd found. My mind jumped immediately to money, to rent, to bills, to food, to a way out that wasn't begging someone for help. But Litma's whine turned into a quiet, steady sound of discomfort. When I looked at her, she was pacing in a tight circle with her tail tucked, ears back, like she wanted to run but didn't know where to go. "It's fine," I told her automatically, like she could understand. "It's just coins." She didn't come closer. She backed away from the spot where I'd dug, eyes fixed on the hole as if it were a mouth. I should have listened to her. Dogs know things humans pretend not to notice. I took the coins inside anyway. I washed the dirt off in the kitchen sink, watching the water run brown. As the coins became cleaner, the gold looked older, deeper, not shiny the way new jewelry is. It was the kind of gold that felt wrong to hold, like it had a history that didn't want to be remembered. I put them in a small tin and told myself I'd figure out what to do later. Sell them? Maybe. Get them checked. Maybe they weren't even real. Maybe it was costume stuff someone buried for fun. I tried to keep my thoughts reasonable. But that night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was back in the garden. The sky was dark and the garden didn't look overgrown anymore. It looked freshly disturbed, like the earth had just been turned. The ground was soft, almost wet, and it gave under my feet in a way that made me feel like I might sink. Then I saw the soil move, not like an animal running under it, not like a mole. This movement was slower, heavier, like something big shifting beneath the surface. I tried to step back, but I couldn't move. My body felt locked in place, like the air itself had weight. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The soil bulged upward. And then it rose. A tall shape pulled itself out of the ground like it had been waiting there, and I had finally given it permission. It stood upright in one smooth motion, not struggling, not shaking dirt off like a living creature would. It was too controlled. It had antlers, not the clean, symmetrical antlers you see on deer. These were twisted and jagged, like broken branches forced into the shape of a crown. They reached up and out, wide enough that I felt sure they would catch on the trees if it moved. Its eyes were pale, not glowing. Not bright, just empty, like someone had drained all color out of them. It stared at me without blinking, without breathing, without any sign that it was alive in the way we understand life. It stood over the place where I had dug, like that patch of earth was its doorway. I felt something in the dream that wasn't just fear. It was recognition, like it knew me already, like it had been watching me longer than I'd been alive. When I woke up, my sheets were damp with sweat. The room was cold, much colder than it should have been. I sat up and listened. The house was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, like the silence was packed tight with something waiting. Litma was pressed against my leg, trembling. Her eyes were open, staring toward the bedroom door. I whispered her name. She didn't look at me. The next day, things started happening. Small things at first, annoying things you can explain away if you're determined enough. A cup tipping off the counter even though it hadn't been near the edge. A door creaking open on its own. A sudden cold draft in a hallway with no open windows. The kind of stuff people laugh about in old houses. But Litma stopped laughing. She refused to go near the garden. If I tried to coax her out, she'd plant her paws and shake her head. Once when I tugged her gently by the collar, she let out a sound I'd never heard from her before. Not a bark, not a whine, but a warning. Inside the house, she started growling at corners. Not at mice, not at bugs, at empty air. At the upper corners of the room where nothing should be. Sometimes she'd follow something with her eyes, head tilting slightly as if tracking movement. But I could never see what she was seeing. At night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow footsteps, dragging like someone learning how to walk. Like each step was being tested. They didn't sound like a person walking with shoes. They sounded heavier, duller, as if whatever was moving didn't lift its feet all the way off the floor. The first time I heard it, I sat up in bed and held my breath. The steps stopped. I waited, heart thudding, trying to decide if I should call out, grab something, do anything. Then the steps started again, closer this time. Litma growled low in her throat, her fur standing up along her spine. I didn't sleep much after that. I tried to calm myself by blaming stress. I'd lost my job, moved suddenly, and landed in an empty house in a quiet village. Of course, my brain was on edge. Of course, I was hearing things. Of course, my dreams were getting weird. But then a memory surfaced. Not a true memory, more like a line I'd read once, tucked away in my mind. I couldn't remember where it came from. Maybe an old forum, maybe a book, maybe something someone said as a joke. Every buried treasure has its keeper. Not a person, not a ghost. Something older, something that stays behind when gold is hidden in the earth. Something that doesn't forget. Something that knows the difference between the hand that buried it and the hand that stole it. If you dig where you shouldn't, it follows you home. First it comes in your dreams, then it appears in the corners of your house. And once it crosses your doorstep, it doesn't leave. I laughed at myself when the thought came, but the laugh sounded thin in the empty kitchen. I looked at the tin of coins sitting on the shelf and didn't like the way it seemed to pull my attention. Like even when I wasn't thinking about it, part of me was always aware of where it was. I tried to ignore it anyway. I told myself I'd bury them back. I told myself I'd take them to someone in town and ask questions. I told myself all kinds of things, but I kept putting it off. because if I acted on it, it would mean admitting something was wrong. And then Litma disappeared. It happened in the middle of the day. One moment she was in the kitchen while I made tea, and the next moment the house was too quiet. I called her name. No response. Nothing. The front door was closed, but when I checked the back, the latch was loose. I didn't remember opening it, but I also didn't remember closing it. I ran outside calling her name until my voice went raw. I searched the yard, the garden, the fields. I went down the road past abandoned houses and empty lots. I knocked on a neighbor's door and asked if they'd seen a dog. The neighbor looked at me with that blank village expression people get when they don't want to get involved. No one had heard anything. No barking, no yelping, no sound of a dog running through brush. It was like she'd been erased. By the time the sun started to set, my panic had turned into something else, a heavy, sick certainty that made my hands shake even when I stood still. That night, the house felt wrong in a way I could not explain away. The air was thick and cold, not the normal cold of an old building. This was a cold that seemed to press against my skin, like the house had been filled with refrigerated fog. Every breath felt shallow. The silence felt loaded, like a pause before something happens. I kept hearing small sounds, a floorboard settling in the next room, a faint thump inside the walls, something brushing against the outside of the house, slow and careful, like a hand dragging along wood. I checked every room twice, carrying my phone like it could protect me even without signal. I turned on every light and made the house as bright as possible. The bright rooms felt like a lie painted over something rotten. I stood by the back window and looked out at the garden. It looked untouched. No sign of digging, no dark patch of disturbed soil, no hole, no mess, just weeds and shadow, like the earth had closed itself back up and smoothed over the wound I'd made. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Because if the garden was untouched, then where had the coins come from? And if Litma was gone, then where had she gone? I walked toward the hallway because I needed to prove to myself that it was just my mind playing tricks. The hallway was darker than it should have been, even with the lights on. The far end of it looked like a pocket where the light couldn't reach. I stared down it, blinking. At first I saw nothing but darkness. Then I thought I saw a shape. Tall, still, so tall the ceiling looked too low for it. And above the shape, a suggestion of antlers scraping softly, like wood against plaster. My breath caught, my eyes watered instantly. I blinked hard, and the hallway was empty again. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe grief for my dog was bending my senses. I kept telling myself that. I sat down on the floor near the living room because my legs didn't feel steady. I held my knees and tried to listen rationally. I tried to pick out normal house noises and name them so they couldn't scare me. Wood expands, pipes move, old nails shift. Then the floorboards in the dark part of the hallway creaked again. Not a random pop, not a settling sound, a slow creak, like weight transferring carefully from one foot to another. I didn't want to look. I did anyway, because the part of me that needed to survive knew that not looking doesn't make a threat disappear. The darkness at the end of the hallway looked thicker now, like the light was being swallowed, and I understood something simple, something that made my stomach drop. Whatever I dug up didn't feel like money anymore. It felt like a hook, like I had pulled on a line buried under the ground, and something on the other end had finally felt the tug. I don't know what I brought into this house. I only know I'm not alone, and the night is stretching out in front of me like it has no end. My heart is pounding so hard it hurts. I'm jumping at every tiny sound. I keep thinking I hear Litma's nails on the floor, but it's always followed by silence that feels almost mocking. If I make it through the night, I'm putting those coins back, even if I have to dig until my hands bleed. If I make it through the night, I'm leaving. But right now, sitting on the floor with the hallway breathing darkness at me, I can't stop thinking about that thing in my dream. The antlers, the pale, empty eyes, the way it stood over the disturbed earth like it was guarding a door. And the worst part is this. I don't think it followed me because I took the gold. I think it followed me because I found it. Because now it knows I'm here. And I don't think it's going to let me sleep. I don't think it's going to let me go. I don't think I'm going to survive the night.